Alternative formats for this presentation can be found on the Financial Services website. Visit or contact us at the Financial Services training page. Email us at finance.training@queensu.ca or give us a call at 613-533-2050. Welcome to Procurement in the Broader Public Sector, Rules and Policy. This tutorial will help you understand the rules and policies related to procurement in the broader public sector. Content of this tutorial will include legislation, impact on Queen's policies, broader public sector procurement directive, Queen's procurement policy, supply chain code of ethics, mandatory requirements, rules covering use of consultants, procurement thresholds, and competitive and non-competitive procurement. Federal and provincial legislation. Procurement in the public sector in Canada is covered by two tiers of legislation, federal and provincial. At federal level, we have the Agreement on Internal Trade, AIT, and this covers every province in Canada. It sets out the guidelines for how provinces should craft their own provincial legislation, covering public sector procurement in their province. In Ontario, the provincial government passed the Broader Public Sector Accountability Act in 2010. This act, otherwise known as Bill 122, provides for the creation of directives by individual ministries, and for our sector, the ones that cover us are the Broader Public Sector Procurement Directive 2011, the Broader Public Sector Expenses Directive 2011, the Broader Public Sector Perquisites Directive 2011. Queen's adopted the BPS Procurement Directive in its procurement policy and has created new policies as a result of the Expenses and Perquisites Directive. All of our procurement processes must conform to the requirements of the BPS Procurement Directive. Impact on Queen's policies. As a result of the directives, Queen's made revisions to the procurement policy, procurement card policy, and the expenses policy. At the same time, we introduced the hospitality policy and perquisites policy. All of these policies comply with the directives coming from the provincial government and were effective on the 1st of April 2011. Since then, we have made additional changes to ensure compliance with the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, Integrated Accessibility Standards. What is the purpose of the BPS Procurement Directive? The main objectives of the BPS Procurement Directive are to provide consistent procurement practices across every organization within the Ontario broader public sector. Universities are considered to be part of the broader public sector, hence the need for us to comply with the directives. To ensure that publicly funded goods and services are acquired through a process that is fair, open, and transparent. To achieve this element, Queen's spent a lot of time creating new tender documents and processes that comply with this particular requirement. To ensure that there is accountability through each stage of the procurement. And to maximize the value achieved through the use of public funds. Value takes into consideration the whole life cost of a product, not just the unit cost. Our tender process is based on a split between evaluated criteria and price. Typically, the weighting is 75% evaluation criteria to 25% price. BPS Procurement Directive, Core Principles. The BPS Procurement Directive became effective on the 1st of April 2011 and addressed 5 core principles for procurement within the broader public sector. These are accountability. Organizations must be accountable for the results of their procurement decisions and the appropriateness of the processes. Transparency. Organizations must be transparent to all stakeholders. Wherever possible, stakeholders must have equal access to information on procurement opportunities, processes, and results. Our tender documents say exactly what we are going to do once a contract is awarded, and lay out in detail how we will evaluate responses. Our processes ensure that we adhere to what we say in the tender documents. Value for money. Organizations must maximize the value they receive from the use of public funds. A value for money approach aims to deliver goods and services at the optimum total lifecycle cost. This is reflected in the fact that our tender document addressed service, quality, and technical criteria as well as price. Quality service delivery. Frontline services provided by organizations, such as teaching and patient care, must receive the right product, at the right time, in the right place. Process. Standardized processes across the entire sector remove inefficiencies and create a level playing field. Our tender documents are the same or very similar to those used at other universities. What changed? The broader Public Sector Accountability Act brought with it a number of new rules and consistent, accountable standards for the broader public sector. These new rules include a ban on using public funds to pay for consultant lobbyists, new directives setting out rules for procurement and expenses, specific rules covering consultants and consultancy services, requirements specific to hospitals and local health integrations networks, LHINs. For example, reporting and publicly posting expense information, and bringing hospitals under Freedom of Information legislation. BPS Procurement Directive Requirements. The BPS Procurement Directive aligns with the principles of the Agreement on Internal Trade, the Quebec-Ontario Trade Agreement, and the Management Board of Cabinet Procurement Directive. For Queens, what this means, for instance, is that the threshold at which we must post a notice of tender publicly is set at $100,000 for all goods, services, and construction. The BPS Procurement Directive made it mandatory for organizations within the BPS to implement the Supply Chain Code of Ethics within their procurement policies. The Code of Ethics applies to all procurement carried out within the university, and we will cover this later in the presentation. The BPS Procurement Directive made it mandatory for organizations within the BPS to implement policies and procedures that are compliant with the directive and the Agreement on Internal Trade. Procurement Policy, 1st of April 2014. Queen's University must maintain high legal, ethical, managerial, and professional standards in the management of the resources entrusted to it as a publicly funded institution. We must ensure that products and services are acquired in a manner that ensures the university obtains value for money and meets its statutory, legal, and ethical obligations. Within the procurement department, we are required to employ suitably qualified buyers and sourcing specialists, and to provide them with further professional training. As mentioned already, the university has adopted the BPS Procurement Directive and the Procurement Code of Ethics within its procurement policy. The university procurement process must not be used for personal purchases. All requirements for consultancy must be processed using a purchase order. And finally, all procurement must meet the requirements of the Accessibility for Ontarians Act Integrated Accessibility Standards. Procurement policy content. The revised policy covers all of the mandatory requirements set out in the BPS Procurement Directive, and these include authorization levels, as set out in the policy on approval and execution of contracts and invoices, segregation of duties within the procurement process, competitive procurement process for non-consulting requirements, competitive procurement process for consulting services, 3 quotes required irrespective of value of contract, non-competitive procurement for non-consulting services, and non-competitive procurement for consulting services, sign off by the principal. Supply Chain Code of Ethics. The Supply Chain Code of Ethics applies to all procurement carried out within the university, and its goal is to achieve an ethical, professional, and accountable process within the organization. Personal integrity and professionalism. All broader public sector, BPS, supply chain participants must act and be seen to act with integrity and professionalism. Honesty, care, and due diligence must be integral to all supply chain activities within and between BPS organizations, suppliers, and other stakeholders. Respect must be demonstrated for each other and the environment. Confidential information must be safeguarded. Participants must not accept gifts and favors, provide preferential treatment, publicly endorse suppliers or products, or engage in any other activity that would create or appear to create a conflict of interest. Accountability and transparency. Supply chain activities must be open and accountable. In particular, tendering, contracting, and purchasing activities must be fair, transparent, and conducted with a view to obtaining the best value for public money. All participants must ensure that scarce public sector resources are used in a responsible, efficient, and effective manner. Compliance and continuous improvement. All BPS supply chain participants must comply with this Code of Ethics and the laws of Canada and Ontario. Participants should continuously work to improve supply chain policies and procedures, to improve supply chain knowledge and skill levels, and to share leading practices. New mandatory requirements. The BPS Procurement Directive and the BPS Expenses Directive introduced new mandatory requirements related to the fact that competitive acquisition of consulting services is now required regardless of dollar value. This means obtaining 3 quotes if the contract value is less than $100,000, and posting publicly if the contract value is over $100,000. The approval authority framework related to consulting services is different from other services, and for non-competitive situations, the principal's signature is required irrespective of value. Effective management of BPS contracts. Payment for meals and incidental expenses to contractors is not allowed. Per diem expense claims no longer permitted. Receipts required and daily maximum is based on Treasury Board of Canada meal allowances, Appendix C, Section 1.2. Mileage, 55 cents per kilometer. Changes regarding consultants. The Expenses Directive prohibits the reimbursement of meals and incidental expense for consultants and contractors, and as mentioned already, the BPS Procurement Directive now requires competitive tendering for consulting services irrespective of the contract value. The BPS Procurement Directive sets out an approval authority schedule for consultancy services, and this has been built into the procurement policy. Procurement thresholds. The thresholds set out in the procurement policy begin at requirements less than $5,000, and for these, we recommend the use of purchasing card where possible, or purchase order if not. You do not need to obtain alternative quotes for procurement of this value. Between $5,000 and $9,999, you should enter your requirement on a PeopleSoft requisition, and again, you do not need to obtain alternative quotes. When the requirement exceeds $10,000, but the total contract value is expected to be less than $100,000, you are required to obtain 3 quotes for the goods or services. The requirement must be entered on a PeopleSoft requisition, and the 3 quotes must be attached. If you cannot obtain 3 quotes, you must complete a sole source form, number P0001, which can be found on the Procurement website under the Forms tab. If you have a requirement for goods or services that exceeds $100,000, please contact Strategic Procurement Services. We will lead the open tendering process, and you will have full input into what we say in the request for proposals, how we will evaluate the responses, and the weighting that will be applied to each of the criteria. For consultancy services, you need to obtain 3 quotes, irrespective of the value of the contract. As with non-consultancy requirements, if the total value is over $100,000, we must post the RFP publicly, and only Procurement has access to do this. Service providers, definitions. The BPS Procurement Directive sets out definitions for consulting services, non-consulting services, and employee. Employment contracts are not covered under procurement legislation or our processes, so if you are bringing in a temporary employee, please refer to HR process requirements rather than procurement. A consultant is a person or entity that under an agreement, other than an employment agreement, provides expert or strategic advice and related services for consideration and decision-making. Consulting services means the provision of expertise or strategic advice that is presented for consideration and decision-making. A non-consulting service provider is an individual or company who contracts to provide services other than consulting services to another individual or business. Examples may include consultants, but the work they do for us is considered to be non-consultancy. Examples could be property brokers or headhunters. We frequently bring in IT-related consultants, but the work they do is of a tactical nature, such as working on the development of an application such as PeopleSoft. Non-competitive procurement. Requesters must complete a P0001 form to justify any non-competitive procurement of goods or non-consulting services valued at more than $10,000 before taxes. The BPS Procurement Directive mandates that authorization of non-competitive procurements be obtained one level higher than that required for a competitive procurement of the same dollar value. Sole source forms can be found on the Procurement website. There is one for Goods and Services Sole/Single Sourcing Form P0001. Consulting Services Sole/Single Sourcing Form P001C. Requesting the use of a high bidder. For example, if you do obtain 3 quotes but do not want to go with the lowest price. Form P001H. Note that this form uses standard approval levels as a competitive procurement process has been followed. And finally, one for construction/renovation, sole/single sourcing, Form P0001 PPS. Only the options listed on page 2 of the form are eligible for exemption from competitive procurement. These are set by the Federal Agreement on Internal Trade, AIT, and the written justification should clearly align with the option selected. Sole source forms can be found on the Strategic Procurement Services website under the Forms tab. The reasons for sole sourcing or single sourcing come from the AIT and are the only reasons that can be accepted for using the non-competitive procurement route. Bad planning and not having time to run a competitive tendering exercise is not accepted as a reason for sole sourcing. Open Competitive Procurement, RFX. Open competitive procurement means competition that is posted on one of two websites that are used to let all subscribers across Canada and the US know that we are going out to tender for a specific good or service. The sites are Bidingo and Merx. Queen's typically posts tenders on Bidingo. There are a number of forms that we use for obtaining responses, and the first is the Request for Proposals, RFP. When we use this form, procurement will manage the process and seek input from campus clients. Typically, we need input on what is required, how you want to evaluate responses, and the weighting to be applied to each of the criteria. The template was developed with the assistance of a leading procurement lawyer, and any changes require legal review before being put to use. The Request for Quote, RFQ, form is used when we have a clearly defined requirement for a good or service and when the cost is the primary driver. For RFPs, the split between evaluation criteria and cost is usually 75-25. But for RFQs, this changes to 40-60. When we want to set up a number of suppliers for one commodity, we use the Request for Supplier Qualifications, RFSQ, form. This differs from the first two in that cost becomes less relevant and the ability to deliver the goods or service becomes the dominant criteria. The RFSQ process involves two stages. The first, to qualify the suppliers, and the second stage is used to select which supplier on the list will be awarded work each time a need arises. For example, we have a number of preferred suppliers set up for printing. Every time we are approached by a campus client needing printed material, we obtain 3 quotes and allocate the job to the lowest bid, or, in order to share the business around equally, we allocate the job to the supplier with the lowest share in the overall business to date. The Ontario government recently told the sector that we need to increase our level of collaborative spend, and as a result should see an increase in savings. With this in mind, we try to set up a collaboration with other institutions every time we go out to tender for a commodity that a large number of universities use. How may we help you today? If you have questions, give us a call at 613-533-2626. Our fax number is 613-533-2579. Or email us at buystuff@queensu.ca. We are located at 207 Stewart Street, 3rd floor, Rideau Building. Our hours of operation are Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. We are closed during the noon hour. This concludes our tutorial. To learn more or to review additional training resources and video tutorials, visit the Financial Services training page, or visit Strategic Procurement Services website for further procurement-related material.